Good morning. It's Thursday, April 16th. We are going to spend some time with Scott talking about H 942, an act relating to miscellaneous agricultural subjects, section 3, unit pricing. We spent some time yesterday talking with hearing both sides of it. At the end of the day, my message to them was that I think that they could come to a meeting of the minds if they just worked amongst themselves. That at the end of the day, if they were to come to us with a plan, that after review, that probably we could support that, not knowing full well what's in that plan. But with the way the discussion was had yesterday, it sounded like they were close. But also, it's very important that we hear from the folks that are the unit pricing people within the state. So that was very important that we got Scott Dolan and Mark Paquette in, and welcome. The floor is yours.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Senator. And a couple of things. We do have a PowerPoint today to present, but before we get started, I just wanted to make some overall general comments.
Tell us who you are.
Mark Paquette, Weights and Measures, Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, Program Chief.
Scott Dolan, Vermont Weights and Measures Specialist.
And I want to add, Scott is the technical person on unit pricing. He's taken the lead on a lot of the technical aspects on this. And I'm very pleased to say that Scott even helped write the book on unit pricing in conjunction with our federal partners down there out of Washington, D.C. So it was very unusual for them to partner with a state, and they had 4 experts down there out of NIST. And they looped Scott on. So you have 4 folks on there from NIST, and then Scott in the state of Vermont there too. So a great resource on unit pricing if we get into any technical aspects.
And before you start, I apologize that I did turn the floor back over to you. I just got to take it back just for a second. Yep. One of the things this committee is very, I would say, known for is watching out for the little person.
Yeah. And
I think that is about the only concern that I'm seeing. I should say that that's very dangerous. But anyways, a concern that we are seeing is that we're worried about the mom and pop stores. And we did hear something. We'll say, well, we think it'd be very important that if they could change the prices while the stores are open. Well, you know, I'm sorry about these mom and pop stores. They hire the high school kid. Hey, here's the list of what you need to do. We need to change the price on Kent Mill soup today. And then so, I mean, that would be a very hard thing to do as far as we move forward. And so now
I've got some stuff to just a broad view and then technical thing, but a few things, you know, why did we even do this? Yeah. What issues needed to be corrected? Our current unit pricing law is over 50 years old, done in the 1970s. It's antiquated. It's old. It was done when the retail industry was different. The internet did not even exist. Some of the language and the regulation is cumbersome and difficult to comply with. It's hard for us to enforce, and it's hard for the retailers to comply with. So the purpose of this is to update those antiquated laws and regulations. It's intended to have Title VI language, unit pricing law, reference and be in line with weights and measures law, which already by reference of Handbook 130 references the national requirement. So we want to bring Title IX and Title VI in there together. And we have been already enforcing the national standards for 3 years. Language is clear. It's nice. It's easily understood compared to what the Vermont law was. So this update would bring them into compliance, and it would actually reference what Title IX is already enforcing. What are the benefits of having some of the national regulations? We have Walmart, we have Tractor Supply, we have all these folks coming in, and the national grocery store change, and they are pulling their hair out. They're dealing with Massachusetts law, New Hampshire law, New York law, and Vermont law. If you have the national regulations and they understand and everyone's on the same page, they can design their labels. And they come into New England, and now they don't have to do 7 tags. They can do 1. The clarity is there. The uniformity is there. Understanding is there. And the enforcement is easier. And the consumer's protected also. So that's part of the reason on this. Also, what was lacking in the original unit pricing law, and we kind of changed this to a pricing law. Something that was lacking in that was also a requirement to have retailers simply to have not a unit price, but just a price anytime that something is offered for sale at retail. And we're getting some complaints from consumers that are going into some of the smaller stores and you have a line of objects for sale with no associated price. And there's nothing there if they don't fall under enterprise law and regulation and they're exempt, which some of them are, then there's nothing that we can do to have a price stated there. So this is very simply in about a sentence will correct that. And it's something that is consumer driven and consumer protection driven from our point of view. And also that you talked about the mom and pop stores and the changing of prices and when that is allowed. And our exemption, and Scott helped write the regulation, my understanding, this only applies to electronic shelf tags and our concern with dynamic and surge pricing. So what we want to do is protect the customer from going in and seeing a price on the shelf at 9 in the evening and buying, being in the store half an hour and getting to the checkout, and now all of a sudden they're being charged $1 more because electronic shelf tags in the program can allow them to change that before they get to the register, and or if this isn't in place, perhaps do it multiple times a day during surge pricing issues. So it's not intended to impact those that are doing it the old-fashioned way and putting the tags up. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. So the mom and pops, they've got a high school person changing the prices. They absolutely can do that whenever they want. And the way that they were doing that. This is targeted toward, if you read the language, only toward that surge pricing, change in technology, internet capability that we didn't have 50 years ago to protect people. I don't, they can do an algorithm and they know on a Friday afternoon that a lot of people are driving home at 5 o'clock. And then a lot of 6 packs of beer get sold, and all of a sudden they raise the price from 5 to 7:30, and boom, all of a sudden it's up. All of a sudden 7:30 hits, the regular shoppers come back in. They want to be competitive with the other stores. Now they drop. Right. We want to avoid that, and we want to avoid 10 price changes during the day. That's the intent. So I hope that's some clarity.
You did beautiful on that. In fact, you did so well on that. I'm gonna throw another one at you.
Yes.
So because you knocked that one out of the park. So the senators yesterday on a little bit of a roundtable discussion that we've had have said that on some of the smaller stores that they know they're going to pay more, but it is because it's a convenience and they know that they're stopping in there. They're going to get in there. They're going to get out of there. They're going to grab the bag of chips, the soda, the coffee, or whatever it's going to be. And they know they're going to pay more and they're accepted with that. And I think that might be the sentiment of a lot of people, probably even more people than what the voices that you've heard about. But at some point in time, if you could address that, it doesn't have to be now, but something during the discussion of, but it was a very good discussion, I thought, that we had around the table that the consumers do expect on some of these smaller places where they're not going in to buy the groceries and all of that. They're just grabbing something of convenience to take care of the sweet, the salt, the thirst, whatever, and they know that they're going to pay more.
And on some level, I certainly understand and agree with that on some level. I shop, I run in, I buy something, and we've talked internally, we've had long talks and discussion on this. And I agree that convenience stores can be a different animal. And we haven't taken a strong, firm stand either way. We have pros and cons, whether this should fall under all stores or not. We recognize and appreciate the dialogue we've had with the Retail Grocers Association and back and forth on some of this. And I know some of this was touched upon yesterday. And I'll just say that retailing is changing in the state of Vermont, it's changing everywhere. And if it's not, my only, I understand the argument for the exemption, and I'm not taking a stand one way or the other. I'll just say a caveat, and I'm going to let Scott speak to this in a moment. You do have a few food deserts and a few places where sometimes the convenience stores start to evolve into more of a grocery store.
Yeah, we understand that as
that
well.
would be just one of my concerns, and I would say very few people are gonna currently get a price in a convenience store. You go in, the idea is for you to go in and buy a lot of items and have like items, make your dollar value comparison on those items if you're on a tight budget on what makes sense. You don't do as much of that on a convenience store. I'm not going to acknowledge that. However, Are there benefits to unit pricing everywhere? I would say some of the benefits are it encourages the stores to have accurate pricing, pay attention to pricing. People who have unit pricing can use it if they want to use it. If the store grows and expands and becomes more of a grocery store, then it's in place and that service is available. The cons, again, you already mentioned some of those. There's initial costs for these stores, and there's ongoing maintenance costs for these stores. And I actually have a list and some of those other issues, and it's not utilized or used as much. State of Vermont has used a lot of compliance and enforcement discernment over many years. I've been here 37 years. And it's a different world. 1989 started in '89. It's a different world and different retailing, different customer base, different folks we dealt with. And historically, it's been on the books for convenience stores that come and fall under this. Based on policy, we have not enforced it in convenience stores for some of the reasons that I just said. Having said that, it's getting consumers are getting a little more fussy. They're looking at more things. People are moving up from Massachusetts and they're like, well, Massachusetts, this is required in Massachusetts. Why don't you people require it? Why don't you? I'm on the phone with these folks. I understand both sides of it. I understand the consumer protection point of it. And I also understand the amount of work it is for some of the other stores where it is not utilized by the consumer as much. So I hear both sides of that. It is a different world, and that those are just some of my concerns and some of my thoughts. I'm going to throw it out to Scott on the
Senator Major might have a question.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I think obviously we have to do something. This is no doubt about that. But it's something that you said. I'm just curious as to how many people are really shopping really doing the unit price shopping. Do we have a percentage? Do we know that?
I'm going to say something anecdotally and pass it on to Scott. He's actually on the committee and on the national committee too.
Absolutely.
In the large grocery stores, it's utilized. Yes, anecdotally, it's used a lot. I use it. My wife does it, and we get a fair amount of consumer complaints. And we had one this week, like picture of it today on the complaint. Down in southern part of the state, we've had repeat consumer concerns. We've gone into the big stores and then unit pricing inspections the way we would do price verification inspections, and we do that very highly utilized in the large stores. Smaller ones, maybe less so. Scott, did you have any specific stuff on?
So there's a slide on this later, but I'll just read it out to you now. So in 2023, the Food Industry Association did a survey of consumers, again, a wide sample, and they published in their U.S. shopper trends for 2023 that 74% of shoppers use unit pricing if and when it's available.
Wow, that
again, if and when it's available.
Sure.
Right. So that's the number they put out in 2023, and that's coming from the Food Association industry. And then I'll have a slide on that a little while.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've taken up your time. We'll let you get started on your stuff.
Then we can go right to the.
Okay, we'll have some more questions.
Yeah, and feel free to ask questions as we go through this. So what I've got up here in this end, just a title slide. So basically, you're mostly all familiar with the orange unit pricing, just put it up there in a big thing. You might not be as familiar with electronic shelf labels. This is a picture of an electronic shelf label. This comes from Walmart. This is the largest manufacturer of these things. So the most of them you see are this brand. They're not in every store yet, but all the Walmarts have them. All these in Rutland has them. I believe Lowe's has them. Kohl's has them. And they're all different shapes and forms. So they're coming just to get you guys have an idea of what those are and what they look like. And again, when I first saw them, I actually didn't realize that they weren't paper because they're like a note, so they're like a digital paper, not a screen.
They do look like paper.
Yeah. And so just putting that out there so you guys have an idea of what that's there. All right. So again, just kind of going back to what we're doing with this, right? We're mandating the posting of total selling price, right? Just making sure the consumer knows what they're going to pay before they go to the register to do that. And again, along with that total selling price needs to be displayed to the consumer, just so that way they're right there. If they see a price that doesn't seem right to them, they can question it right then and there instead of having to wait until after the purchase and seeing a receipt. Right? Just some basic stuff. Most stores, I would say 98% of stores comply with the second requirement already, just because of the way the cash register systems have been all set up. A lot of them have a shared screen where both the cashier and the consumer can see the screen. Other ones have dual screens, so they're like all it takes is just a little line right where the price and stuff as the item goes across against the consumer if you want that happens. Obviously, we talked about modernizing the pricing requirements. This is mostly about removing the old regulations. Because as Mark said, we've adopted the national standard for the last 3 years. We've been enforcing it. Most of the time they don't interfere, but there are a couple things where they have conflicting statements about what should be done or slightly different statements about done. And again, clarifying the exemptions, right? This law was written 50 years ago. We really wanted to come back to establish intent, right? What is the intent of this law? And right, that's where you guys come in. Again, where is this going to apply? Who's going to use it? Does it make sense to do everywhere? What, like, that's part of the reason we're coming here, because we want your opinion on these things. And again, also guardrails around dynamic pricing with these electronic shelf labels, right? Here's another version, slightly different brand, same type of thing. And again, just providing some clear boundaries on how these can be used, when prices can be changed. Any questions so far? Okay. Okay, here is the slide I was talking referenced earlier. So this is who is using unit pricing. Again, this is from 2023. The Food Industry Association put this in.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yep.
I always think it's a kind of a funny thing, right? You ask permission to ask a question, but you're gonna ask it anyway, so I do apologize. It's always sounded funny when I said it. I apologize. Who are the respondents? Who were you targeting as far as on the shoppers? Were you what part of the group were you targeting everyone? Or were you talking grocery stores, convenience stores? Who was the target audience that you were trying
I'm not sure who the target, again, this was the Food Industry Association putting the survey on, so the national group. So I don't know who they were targeting, but again, it was a survey sent out through their members.
And it could be very well that it was just targeting people that were grocery shopping.
It could be mixed. It could be, again, people buying pet food, right? It could be any of those things.
Okay.
And then I've just got a couple labels there, right? Like one, and the one on the top is a current pricing label you would see at a convenience store in Vermont. This was taken just a month ago. And so again, you can see that just the basic information is on it. There's no unit price. But the thing about this label is it already has all the information on it to calculate the unit price. It's got the size of the container, it's got the total selling price, and it's got a category. The BEV stands for beverage. So like, again, if a store is going to price all of their beverages, they're going to do all the unit pricing the same. So they would say all beverages are priced by the quart, or they could say by the gallon or by the liter, but that whole category. So it's got all the pieces there. It just needs to calculate the unit price and put it on. And then here's one for this. When we put this together, we made up some generic labels of just examples. And here's again, just one of those labels that we made up that has unit pricing. It doesn't have to look like that, but that is just an example of what unit pricing can look like. Again, similar tag, it's a beverage, right? It's got similar information. One has a unit price presented to the consumer, one does not. All right, here's just kind of, and again, this is just a one example, right? You ask like, why is it useful? Why might it be useful in any type of store, right? You can imagine you're on your way home, your wife gives you a call, we need some milk, okay? And you might choose to get that milk at a grocery store, you might try to get it at a convenience store, or you might get it at like a drugstore, right? And similarly, they all have these same setups. Usually they've got multiple sizes, maybe quarts, half gallons, gallons, or maybe just 2 out of the 3, right? And you're going to, at the very minimum, you're going to get this kind of information, what the size of the product and the price of the product. Okay? So in this case, I think we can all agree, if you're value shopping, the gallon is your thing, right? Just simple math, we're pretty good on that. So the question then becomes is, what if the sign looks like this, right? Now, which is your best value? And okay. The other question is, why would a business put just the half gallons at 25% off, right? Probably because those may be short dated and they need to move them, right? So they want to sell more of them, right? But in this case, how do you know which is the best value, right? If you want a gallon of milk, maybe it's cheaper to buy 2 half gallons. And again, if the consumer is presented with the unit price for these, whether it's by quart or by gallon, right? Now you instantaneously know, oh, that's on sale. I need a gallon of milk. I'm going to pick up 2 of those. Or I just need some milk to get me through until we go to the grocery store because this is way more expensive than what I'm going to pay at the grocery store. I'm still going to buy. Then you can buy either the quart, right, because it's your smallest dollar value, or you could buy the half gallon, which is your best unit value, right? It gives that consumer that choice. They don't have to do any math, and it's right there and it's obvious to them.
So when they do the unit price at $1.13 and it 25% off, if it doesn't have the coupon, does it have that other price like
So-
does it have to show? And I think that as I've seen like in Shaw's and that, it does show.
Yes,
the
there-
25%
whenever they post a retail price, and that's again typically Shaw's and like Hannaford, they'll post their regular price. They'll have a unit price for that, and they'll post their sale price, and they'll have a unit price for that. And that is again best practice, right? Because it just lets the consumer know how much they're getting off. It's there, and again, this is something you could see in all the stores, right? The other thing to think about what's going on just in this quick example is we're starting to see, again, this is going to sound weird, half gallons that aren't half gallons. They're not like some companies, again, shrinkflation, right? Things are getting smaller because you're getting more expensive. We've now seen a couple brands that occasionally will have a 62-ounce container. It looks just like a gallon. It's sitting next to a half gallon. It's sitting right next to other actual half gallons. The price may be a little bit lower or the same. The unit price then would indicate to the consumer that something's different between those 2 containers without them having to get in. Because again, if you're trying to get down and actually read the net content label on those milk jugs, the consumer's just not going to do that, right? You're going to, okay, I'm just going to grab the cheapest one, right? And providing this information to them just makes them aware. It's more transparent when that stuff happens. And that goes for almost any type of product, right? As it downsizes or things change.
Potato chips have been notorious.
Crackers.
And ice cream.
As long as you have great chips.
Ice cream.
Well, so you say ice cream. So this is, I put this another great example. Did you guys realize that starting 5-6 years ago, not all pint Ben & Jerry's containers are a pint anymore?
Right.
Right. Anything with there's some of them are 15.8 or 15.7 fluid ounces.
Wow.
But they're still in the same container. They sit right next to the pints in the store. So if you don't have unit pricing, the consumer doesn't realize that other container is slightly smaller.
You see it in cheeses as well, like a Parmesan cheese. It's going to be more 6 ounces versus the 8-ounce bag that you used to. Bacon, you're seeing not a full pound anymore. You're seeing 8 ounces or 12 ounces, I guess, or whatever. But yeah. So.
And the whole numbers are a little bit easier for consumers to deal with, but it's when like soda goes from a 16-ounce bottle to a 15.4 ounce bottle, right? Then it gets much harder to do the math live in your head right there when you're trying to figure out value comparisons. Where providing this information, it allows you to do that, right? In the case of the example I've shown, it would actually help the business move the product they wanted to move because it helps right, if it's provided, right? But that's something, again, it's a tool that can be used. All right, and then lastly, this is a consumer complaint that came in last Friday. So lady sent in this picture, and I'll just explain the picture. And this is her actual text from her email. At $3 a pound, which is what is indicated on the tag, a 2-pound bag of apples should cost $6, not $8.99. Right? I brought this to the attention of the produce department, but it left me wondering if we can rely on these labels, right? So this is an interesting interpretation of this label. It's not wrong. Most people would say, oh, the bag is $8.99 and just the unit price information is incorrect. She perceived it the other way. So it's just, again, it's a misrepresentation of price and how the consumers expect it. It is, as we just went over, it is very useful to have, and it's useful to have in any situation. But here's just again, this came in last Friday of a consumer concern.
And there's another one too that drives me nuts, which is the gas price. And then, but if you have one of their cards, it's 10 cents less or whatever. And I just don't believe it should be that way. I don't believe that you should be able to advertise the price because that does stop people. It does pull them in, especially if they're side by each. And it does, oh, shoot, no, I don't have a car, but then they're stuck, right? They've already made that decision to pull in there and to grab that pump handle and to find out, no, it isn't 10%. I don't have a card here. It is what it is. So that does,
Yeah,
bother me.
and when that first started happening, we did get a lot of complaints, especially on the roadside signs that were electronic and they flip back and forth, even when they were labeled, because again, the consumer wasn't at that point trained to read the fine print on a big
Right.
sign, right? So those things happen. Consumers have adjusted to that, right?
Right.
And there's nothing here that would prevent that from them, but I understand what you're, and we definitely, when it started happening, we heard about it because we got so many more complaints until consumers kind of adjusted to that business practice.
It's not right till people figure it out. I always know if it's too good to be true kind of thing,
Right.
you gotta be a member and I'm not a member, I'm keep going.
So is this right or wrong? Cause I'm staying like her 2 times 3.
Well,
not-
it's incorrect, like that information provided to the consumer is incorrect, right?
Yes,
How you view it is wrong is up to your perspective, right? Like she interpreted it that the retail price, the total selling price was incorrect.
which it is not, if it's $3 a pound.
Could be, or if you assume, well, here's the assumptions, right? You assume that the unit price is correct, then the other one's wrong. If I assume that the total selling price is correct, then the unit price is wrong. So one of the, it's just
Well, I'm
misrepresented.
gonna go with lower. So.
Well, you're a consumer, right? So this is, again, that's exactly what this one did, right?
I'll say it was a great representation. It couldn't have come at a better time and it
Right.
made us think in a different way. Because ordinarily, normally when we do unit pricing inspection, we'd say, oh, the unit price is inaccurate. Which one is inaccurate now? Is the price of the product inaccurate because they made a previous statement? Or is the unit price? Either way, our law would cover it because it's a misrepresentation of price. It's inaccurate, it's confusing to the customer, it's
Inaccurate.
actually.
So this would be something that you would act on.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
and we did.
And the customer would get it at $3, whatever's better prices, is that?
We can't enforce that. We can only make sure that those tags are accurate and correct. However, when we respond to the store and store management, then the customer can go back in and get restitution. Because not by law, but just simply by presenting the
Good
information.
So is that paper, is that electronic?
That's a paper tag.
And I assume that's printed by some sort of software.
Yeah, that is it's on a vellum tape usually. I think that one looks like it comes in a big sheet. Right? I'm just looking at the style. Yeah.
So do you guys go and check the software? Because that's written into software. It's
Well,
no
so
fashion.
this gets into kind of one of the topics that we were brought into before of surge pricing earlier. To see somebody's back end or software or algorithms and like how they're setting their prices, right? That's kind of a black box, like
Yeah.
company secrets on this is how we mark this stuff up. These things are our loss leaders. So without like really getting almost like a warrant, right? To see that stuff, you can't see inside the box, right? We go and we verify that tag matches the price that comes up in the store, like in the software when they're actually checking out, right? We don't check anything inside that black box. Because again, that's a much harder ask and a lot of companies would be very, very against us.
You went kind of right where I'm going. I'm a prosecutor. And so I was looking at that as this could be fraud. So, okay. So interesting.
Okay, and that's really the last slide. We've got time to go over the language. So you guys, we can answer any more specific questions about language you guys have.
I don't know that I think we're gonna wait on the language part of it only because I'm really hoping that they can get together and make a deal. So I think the language, whatever we have been there is gonna change. Everybody good with that?
What? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do. I
Go
will
ahead.
have my, you go ahead.
I'll just say, I think the rest of the committee feels the same way I do. I don't think we have an issue with national chains who have adapted and from what you're both saying, agreed that the update of 50 years needs to happen and they've got the wherewithal to affect this. It comes down to how we're going to judge the size of a particular establishment. I think in existing statute, 7,000 square feet or more, or 2 or more stores.
Yeah, that's an intent on that. It was that exemption was done many years ago, and the intent.
How long ago was that?
Oh my word! And again, 50 years ago.
Okay,
And
so it was a long time.
It was a long time ago. It was updated, maybe in the 90s. Square footage might have been
The
updated.
last update that section is showing is 91, but I don't know which
Yeah,
is.
it's been a long time.
Okay.
So I agree with Senator Collmore about how the committee feels that thing. And I know you've said, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot at all. I'm just looking for a little clarity because we're gonna, I think we're in agreement with all what you folks are doing. I know you haven't said you've taken a position on, what an exemption would look like. But for enforcement part, if we were to put exemptions in, what's easier to enforce and what's not easier to enforce? Without putting you guys on the spot of trying to go one way or the other. And if you're gonna change that question to answer it, I'm fine with that. But what would be easier for you if we were trying to come up with an exemption along these lines? Would it be square footage? Would it be volume of sales? Or would it be something else that we're not even thinking about?
Number of stores.
Number of stores? Or none of the above?
It's interesting, we've had these discussions, what's a convenience store? I know one when I see one.
Right,
I know one when
right.
yeah, there's some history to that comment, right? But, if you're getting to that subject, that type of store, Scott talked about intent. What was the intent of the law? For people to go in and utilize this to make value comparisons. If type of stores, if it's being utilized in there, I would think a combination of definition and perhaps definition and square footage. I will just say, and Scott, I'm going to let Scott speak again, very, very technical on that issue. It would be difficult for us to look at the amount of sales. You'd have to, audit, show me your records. What was your sales to? Now you're getting
Well, you couldn't even get inside the black box.
now you're asking for propriety and
Right, that's-
information. And then if you had the number of SKUs, that'd be difficult. Are we going to go through, and if it's 500 or 1,000 SKUs, is an inspector going to go through and count the SKUs? Or are we going to ask them to provide the SKUs? So if anything is done, my suggestion would be the simpler, the better, where everyone can understand, which again was our intent of the law to do this to begin with. But I'm going to let Scott speak on maybe even some of the value that you perceive in this in different stores.
Yeah, I mean, I think the value of it is evident wherever you put it, right? As we just kind of went over. Again, the intent is now the issue, right? What's the intent of this? Who we want to cover? How we want it to present? I've been back and forth with Trish a lot the last couple of weeks about because again, we were trying to get to, like, as a lawyer would say, a legally defendable definition of a store type. I've been trying this with different people since 2023 to get different store type definitions, but there is so much overlap that I don't think you can get to a legally defensible definition. So it's almost better to be as general as possible and say, if you guys want to exempt convenience stores, you would say, it would something be like something, or whatever store types, right? Convenience stores, hardware stores. Convenience stores are exempt, and we'd have some very vague definition that basically we would enforce by policy, because as Mark said, you kind of know a convenience store when you see one, you kind of know what the hardware store is when you see one. There are some mixes and matches somewhere and this or that. But again, as long as nobody challenges us, everything's good. But as soon as you get into like, oh, if Dollar General thinks they're a convenience store, then we're probably going to have a problem. Right. And so this
I
is
agree with that. That's what I'm trying to go through my head.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go through my head in knowledge to us, okay? Not trying to find that exemption. I want the other folks to come to us with that language. But in our head, is there a thought process with you guys to where, no, is there a percentage of groceries sold or anything like that you folks automatically know that language or know what that is? There's probably not that granular.
no. I mean, just to give you an example of some other states.
But when you said the dollar store,
Yeah.
that was perfect. You're a Dollar General.
Yeah, and those are kind of where we're seeing the overlap, right? Because Dollar
Right.
Generals can be small, convenience stores can be big. That's why square footage doesn't really work. Maybe Dollar Generals have more SKUs, but there are some really large convenience stores. And again, Trish brought that up, I think 2 weeks ago. So I hadn't had the time to go out and ask people like, hey, how many SKUs you guys got? How many SKUs you guys prove? That's kind of how we came to a lot of this language, with me talking to people out in the field saying, how many stores you guys own? Like the 3 is set up. There's a lady who she originally bought just like a little country convenience store. She ran that for a few years. Then she bought what is legitimately a small grocery store, independent market for the town. Then she bought another convenience store, right? This time with gas. Okay. She was literally my test case. Okay. You're a growing business, right? Every couple of years you've added a location, right? At what point do you become a business, right? Because the way the exemption is written now is it allows somebody to get into business and start it without having these extra requirements. That sometimes it's a little bit hard to understand, right? That's why, again, we're here for technical assistance. I've done a lot of that with the industry. I will continue to do a lot of it in the industry. But it gives them a little bit of space to grow. Like we chose 3, New York's is 5. Massachusetts doesn't have one, but you can petition the secretary down there for an exemption, right? So, and they have there's a whole form and stuff, but I haven't looked into it. I haven't asked down there if they actually give any of those, but you can petition for.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
I gotta ask this question because you brought it up. What would an exemption like that look at? What would you guys look at for an exemption? What
As
would
far, as far as,
well, down in New York where they can petition for an exemption. What would an exemption look like?
I mean, again, for us, given what we've done in the past, it's like small stores, right? You'd want the mom and pops to be exempt, right? The little country stores that are like one owned, maybe two owned, right? You go to two little country stores. Maybe one's got a gas pump at it, right? Those are the people you'd want exempt to give them space to actually build their business. And then once they are 3 stores, 5 stores, 10 stores, 500 stores, then you've got the resources to implement this stuff when it's not that big of a hit to your pocketbook. And the other side of that is you'd like them to do it before they get gigantic, right? Because then it's also a bigger ask. So there's like a sweet spot in the middle where this is where it should kind of kick in for them to do it. And again, usually it's done by size, like number of stores. But in cases of like, if you have a big store, maybe you can have more volume, right? And so that may make a case for like why we have that 7,000 or 6,000 square feet exemption in it as well, right? Because if you've got a bigger store, you're probably pushing more volume, right? Maybe making more profit. So these are all the questions to ask. So those are kind of the criteria, but to actually nail it down, there is so much overlap in those types. It's almost better to just say, yeah, we know it when we see them.
Yeah.
And you'll have to trust us to do that.
Yeah, and what you're saying is kind of music to my ears, because I think that a lot of times we talk about putting in statute things that, for me, I'd rather rely on the experts at the agency to come up with rulemaking. So right now, my question is, so for years you have enforced it for convenience stores. Is that part of a policy, a rule, or is it just your discretion that you're using on a regular basis? Are there rules, and I mean actual rulemaking or policies regarding the enforcement of the unit pricing? Do you have the authority to
I'll just
for all of it? Yeah.
make a few comments on that. It has not historically been enforced in convenience stores. That's been based on policy, no rulemaking, nothing concrete. And it's also one of our concerns looking at the changing marketplace. If they fall under this and we start getting consumer complaints on it and we haven't been enforcing it, now what do we do? Now what are we gonna do? Because now the consumer can say it's on the law, they fall under this and you're not doing your job, you're not doing the work. We haven't gotten there yet. Are we gonna get there? That's one of my concerns. Again, changing marketplace, changing consumer, but it's been based on policy that we've vetted through our internal Agency of Agriculture administration.
Is that a written policy or is it? Yeah,
There is something in writing, but
Yeah,
it's very vague.
but there's
It's very
discretion in everything. So
There is,
I'm just
there is.
culture, there's written policy,
There is.
rules, there's statute.
And I'll just also add,
Thing.
we're very limited, even down for a lab, we've got seven staff members, all the running the lab, all the gas pump, the oil trucks, price verification, scale, thousands of things. And we have enforcement priorities, and this has not been in this, you've got this, and this, and we're able to do it based on policy, based on staffing levels. And when you're doing some of this work, you want to also target the biggest bang in the buck, biggest bang for your buck for the least resources. We have few resources to do. So we haven't targeted businesses, but we've gone to the industries and the largest stores where we'll have the biggest impact, where the most people will do their shopping and have the best benefit for the taxpayers.
So it sounds like the easiest way for you guys would be just do it as you're doing now, where you're exercising your discretion to enforce it, just like local police, state police, prosecutors do. And that's just coming from my world, where you have triage. You have to decide, what the thing is that you're gonna work on.
That is an option. That is an option. Although that is an option with a caveat, if we start getting consumers that really push this, are we going to be pushed into doing?
But a lot like what you said, Mark, which I just love, you know when you know.
Yes.
But also, even if they do have an exemption and you're getting complaints on that and you go in there and it's so flagrantly against what was supposed to be, you know when you know.
Yeah, you know.
And at that point in time, you have the chance to say, you know what? I don't care where your exemption is. This is fraudulent.
Yes, on
It's
some
better
things,
happening.
on some things. Yeah.
So I've walked into small convenience stores that still just type, but then I walk into another one, mom and pop store, they're already using a UPC code.
Yes.
At that point, you're saying if you're gone to that technology, you should be now following the UPC regulations. Because you have the machine that's gonna print out the prices, you have to change the prices, or your provider gives you the pricing. And it's like, if you decide, if you step into a store and they don't have unit pricing, then okay, you are totally exempt. But if you do have UPC machine, why can't you give us unit price? Because
That's actually an like, that's, you're actually the first time that anybody's had brought that up to me, and that's actually an excellent point. So that's a feasible place to draw a line as well, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a clear line. You've added functionality, the business has made the investment in that already, but again, that has never occurred to me, but that is a feasible place to draw that line.
yeah,
And then Jen, sorry to jump in, right? I'm not interrupting.
No.
Okay, so, and I probably shouldn't have used the F word fraud, because that's too close to,
I mean, how it work.
but
Oh my God, when did we use that word?
I was like,
I don't think here. That's a major, you gotta watch
All I gotta say is I'm glad that joke actually landed, so thank you all. So when you do find a violation, I assume you're not just immediately enforcing that, you're working with the store and you're trying to do a correction before you actually do any sort of like, I don't even know what the punishment might possibly be. So there are steps that they go through before that.
They're enforcement compliance
Yeah.
steps. And-
So can we talk
and-
about that? I know it's a little bit outside of it. As you're answering that, can you talk about your enforcement mechanisms and what you do have?
Yeah, I'll touch base maybe, we'll talk about price verification inspections. The price verification and unit pricing, they're not the same, but they're related because we're both looking at the shelf tags. Price verification, you want to make sure that shelf tag is $3.99 on the shelf. You bring it to the cash register and it's $3.99. First thing that we like to do is educate the folks that don't know what this is or that it exists. That would be, we would do the same with unit pricing, and that can be the initial contact when we go in to do an inspection. If they're in violation, the first thing we would do is document it, have a chat with the store personnel, offer technical assistance, we have educational resources on our website, and Scott did a wonderful 20-minute PowerPoint.
Don't torture yourself into the mind once.
I tell the folks, we'll reduce the fine, but part of this, you're gonna do this, and if you do Scott's 20 minutes all at once, you paid part of the price. So I joke,
Yeah.
it's really did a great job, and it's highly appreciative, and it's been used by many resources. I'm talking to, we had some higher level enforcement people in the state of Vermont. And this is coming into the conversation now because we've gone with them issuing pricing improvement action plans to us, which include doing the training that we have online. Thank you, Scott. So educate, and then report of corrective action taken, which is not a fine or penalty, but it outlines what was found. It states what the law and regulation is. It's gets sent to them in hard copy and gives them a chance to respond and report back to how they've corrected this. And then if we have a second violation, we have the option to issue a fine or penalty at a lower amount. And we may choose to do that. We have the option to do it or not to do it based on the situation. If there's another penalty after that, we will likely issue a fine or penalty, and it's incremental and increases over time based on the number of violations. Not on the chain, but in the individual store, even if it's a chain.
And just to go, the time frame for what Mark just explained is months and years. It's not days, right? The first inspection, when you first find, you find something wrong. It's probably 6 to 8, maybe even 9 months later that you're going in to check it again. Again, maybe find, hopefully it's corrected, right? Like the best thing in the world is you find something wrong, you say, hey, this is wrong. The next time in, everybody's good. I've had a couple stores that we haven't been into. They were horrible the first time we were in. Next time in, they were perfect. I was like, this is great. Why couldn't everybody do this? You say, hey, this is wrong. And then they fix it. That's fantastic. Like it saves us so much paperwork. And then again, the follow-up. So you're talking second, third year.
And we do issue quite a few fines and penalties.
What is, again, a little bit further than what we were originally talking about, but just curious, especially we got a prosecutor in the room. What's your enforcement, act, your agency? What is it that you, where do you get your enforcement powers from, I guess, as far as, I'm not questioning that, just curious about how it works.
Title IX, Chapter 73, Weights and Measures Law gives us actually significant powers. We actually have police powers.
Yeah.
We use discretion because we never went to police academy, but we actually.
Yeah. It's not what we want.
We have police, we have police powers. We have the right to go into areas that perhaps, if they're challenged, might even be unconstitutional. I don't know, but it gives us significant leeway to go in and do that. So Title IX, Chapter 73, if you read that, and it also gives the Secretary of Agriculture, which we are the Secretary's agent,
Yeah.
and it gives them broad powers to do many things within that law and regulation. And again, it issues, what a standard is, what a pound is, and the traceability. We again, in that same law reference, unit pricing regulation as in Handbook 130. It's not 100. It's not 300 pages. That regulation is 4 pages in the handbook. It's very easy to understand. But the authority comes from that law.
So that actual regulation is just a front and back.
Yeah.
Just so you guys are again, this is a big book, but we're only looking at literally this page, right? The front and back.
And we adopt by reference 4 items out of that handbook, but not the whole handbook.
Yeah.
There's another handbook, the tolerances for devices we adopt in whole. That one is only adopted in one.
A little bit more education for us, please. We might have already done this at the beginning of the presentation, but we were anxious to move forward. What are the exemptions now as far as from unit pricing?
I'll hit some I may forget. I don't know if Scott has it right there, but I believe if it's a sole proprietorship and not part of the chain, anything that's under 7,000 square feet is exempt from unit pricing. There are prescription drugs that are exempt from unit pricing. There are, I believe, anything that comes under the federal alcohol or liquor store sales is exempt from unit pricing. So those are current exemptions. Did I hit it all? I don't.
So these are the actual written exemptions.
That are
This is
currently on
where,
the book.
and again, there's some more up top, just not called exemptions. Again, it's the square footage of 7,000 square feet, or if you have multiple stores, that doesn't apply. And again, where things are for use and consumed on the premises where it's sold, right? Like, so restaurants is that.
Restaurant food, exempt.
Yeah. If we go up here, consumer commodities, again, means any food, cosmetic other than except for drugs sold by prescription. Right. So like that exempts prescription drugs right there. And again, other things. I believe that's it. It's supposed to cover, like, as it's written, it's everything else. And as you can see, down here in the consumeration rate required, there are some, and again, there's debate over why these, like aluminum foil bread, carbonated sodas, cereals, somewhat was written an inclusive list originally, which is an odd way to write a regulation, right? You want to and again, if you would do this, a lot of the stuff covered in mom and pop stuff would be covered, right? Like carbonated soda. But it's like, is that? Yeah, again, is that really the intent? And the regulation even has a longer list in it.
The regulation was so confusing to the retailers, and that's why we have the law, but we reference the national standards for the regulation. But part of the problem that exists and that this would clean up is we would get away from that problematic regulation. It has like Scott said, a non-inclusive list, and it's a huge list and it's confusing. And if something's not on the list, retailers are saying, it doesn't apply, or does it apply? And sometimes we didn't have clear answers to that.
So you guys, good.
Yeah, no, this is I'm bringing it, like,
Yeah,
this
this
is
was
the,
Look how old that is too.
this is like,
Yeah.
this isn't all of it, this is part of it, but,
It's the problem when you try to have a list of stuff, and then if you don't have it all,
and this
it's
is
a consumable, and this was really messy for us.
And this is why this is the one we're trying to, this is the regulation we're trying to remove. With this.
Yeah.
So just adopt the national standard, yeah. Yeah, so
So when I was looking at the law, I was trying to remember whether it said 7,000 square feet or and 2 or more stores. Because I'm trying to think now, so like Jolie, Maple Fields, Stewart's, those all obviously have more than one store, but if each of those was 7,000 square feet or under, that would allow an exemption unless it's and.
no, so this is the way it reads. So, well, let me just put it up and then I'll read it out, right? This way it's, you're not just listening to me.
That's helpful, but
Yeah.
thought this wasn't.
Let's do it here, share again.
we can look it up later.
So I have it right here. Let's look at it right now so we can talk.
Okay.
So it's number one, exemptions number one. A retail store with less than 7,000 square feet of floor space dedicated to the sales of consumer commodities. This is why we always talk about retail space, right? So
Okay.
this line here.
Yep.
The second one, this exemption shall not apply to sales agencies or instrumentalities of companies having 2 or more sales agencies or instrumentalities
Okay.
as part of its numbers, right? Which is a kind of weird way to say you have multiple stores, but like that's what it really says.
Yep.
And so that's why, if you're a big guy, that applies to you, or if you're a big guy in one store, it applies. If you're a big guy in the fact you've got multiple stores, it applies to you.
So at the moment, all of those convenience stores would not be eligible for relief on this. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I don't know what the threshold is, as the chair mentioned. Oh, is it square footage? Is it the number of stores? Is it?
Is it having a?
I'm gonna ask you, I wanna ask a question about that.
Yeah.
So you guys have been involved in this, you guys are engaged in this and very helpful to us. Because we're just, what we're trying to do is not to get ahead of you folks. And that, so you've been doing this, you're engaging. Are you hearing anything that you got a hard no on? Like, the hell no, we're not gonna do, no, we don't like that. No, we're not. I'm knowing full well that it's a legislative process and all that stuff, but is there a hell no that you're, I mean, I know there are things that you would want, but have you heard conversations about, no, that's a hell no for us?
Not
No,
really.
nobody's refused. I mean, people like one company even sent us what their projected cost.
But we're trying to solve this problem and this legislation is coming forward. You guys have been engaged in those talks where you've said you've talked to Tricia and all of that stuff. Are you hearing anything that's gonna be very problematic for you folks?
Other than, just with the Retail Grocers Association with the convenience stores, where they feel it would be onerous for them to actually unit price. They could have said, put in place and then maintain it, and some of the difficulties that they have. Did they say, Scott, they didn't say hell no, but they have, voiced concerns in regard to that.
Out of the 3 we've talked to, they've all said we would rather not do it, but if we were made to do it, like even one of us even said, here's what we think it's going to cost us to do this if you make us do it.
And we encourage them to be part of the process and to come into the house, ag initially, and to you folks too. Because we want,
Yeah.
we want them involved. But we want them to have the opportunity to share their concerns. We do not want to do anything in a vacuum.
I'd like
Well,
to
I
get
believe
Stewart's
that.
back in here because of just what I was asking, when you have because they use a UPC system.
Right.
So I don't understand why you don't want to have a UPC tag. Maybe it's because of the unit pricing.
It's
that it
still
breaks
what
it
it costs.
down more.
Well, so and I can speak a little bit to Stewart's, but I won't. They have basically an in-house system. They didn't buy a package system, so what they built is what they built. So they built it to do exactly what they wanted it to do. So again, anytime they're going to change that, they have to have somebody in-house change, like figure out the software and change labels types, right? And this is where the national standard is very flexible on how they do that. The old standard was, oh, you need an orange, right? So you need an extra color. Like now, black and white's fine. All of those basic stuff. So that's one of those. If you've got more like if you're an Associated Grocer member, where you're supplied, the tags that they supply you already have unit pricing built into them, right? So if you're getting your supplies from them,
We brought that up in some of the testimony that we had yesterday that, why wouldn't it be part of the manufacturer's responsibilities but I get it, that's prices change, but I think they probably have that ability, but again, we're not in that business, so we're trying to not create more hardship. Yeah. Yes,
I'm just thinking,
yeah,
why is it different if you sell gas? In other words, it seems like there was a distinction at one point, whether you have gas pumps and sell groceries, or whether you just sell groceries, but you don't sell gas.
So in some of the definitions Tristan's put forward, there are caveats around having large volumes of your sale through gasoline, right? And that's just, again, trying to quantify a convenience store, like the NAICS codes, right? That's a code designed around a survey to kind of like, generally, how many of these type of stores do we have? Here's roughly the definition. It's level of legal action. So that's what they use. Oh, and they actually have two things in that. I think one is, let me, before I misquote it here, they have convenience retailers, and they have, the older one used to have, because the new one doesn't have it. The older one used to have convenience retailers with gasoline, right? And the new one does not. We got rid of that, and I don't know why they did that in 2022. I don't know either. So again, these are just everyone, like, again, as we've talked about how hard it is to define what a convenience store is, right? This is everybody in the whole country's attempt to do their best for their purposes on what is a convenience store, what is a grocery store, what is a super center, what is a hardware store.
And I think part of that was many years ago when some of these convenience stores, their primary business was selling gas. And they sold, I'll just throw it out, they sold $3 million of gasoline a year, and they sold $250,000 worth of incidental groceries and snacks and food and so on and so forth. And that was much more prevalent 50 years ago.
You're right.
You had a gas station, maybe even a service was provided, and they had a little, convenience store area, and things again change and evolve and everything else.
Yeah, I think business decisions are made. Geez, if I could sell beer,
Yes.
increase my profit. So now I got a beer license. I can sell beer while they're getting gassed up.
And then they start adding a few groceries.
Yeah.
You got your RV, you're going to fuel up, and now you're going to go and grab your hot dogs and your bread and your peanut butter.
Yeah.
And you're off and head to the campground.
Well, I gotta tell you that this is fun, very informative. We had more fun when we went and took that picture a year ago. But this was fun and very informative, very helpful, and I really appreciate you folks coming in. And we're going to keep on including you on any decisions that are made. We will check with you to make sure that that fits into the overall scheme of everything. But appreciate you very much.
And if you have any other questions, like they come up, and again, you don't need to drag us. If you want to drag us over here, that's fine. If you just want to ask us the question, we will.
We will. Well, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Very good.
And thank you so much for having us come in. And again, we really appreciate this, and we appreciate including the retailers also.
So I would
Very
go
much so.
up to that cafeteria and see if they're complying.
The steakhouse there.
Don't let us know.
Is that an anonymous complaint? Or is that
No. Thank you, guys. Committee, let's take a 10-minute break. Let's have